The rain came down in sheets that February morning in 1881, turning the dusty streets of Gold Hill, Colorado into rivers of mud. But Dinah Calloway kept working at her forge anyway, her leather apron soaked through, and her dark hair plastered to her face as she hammered red-hot iron into the shape of a horseshoe. She had learned this trade from her father before consumption took him 2 years ago. And now, at 23 years old, she was the only blacksmith for miles around who could shoe a horse properly without leaving it lame. The rhythmic clang of her hammer against the anvil had become as natural as breathing, and she barely noticed the cold water running down her neck as she focused on getting the curve exactly right. "Miss, you are going to catch your death out here," a deep voice said from behind her, and Dinah looked up to see a tall cowboy standing there holding a black umbrella over his head, rain dripping off the brim of his brown hat. He was maybe 27 or 28, with sun-weathered skin and green eyes that seemed to assess everything they landed on. His clothes were travel-worn but well-maintained, and a Colt revolver hung at his hip in a worn leather holster. "I have work to finish," Dinah said, plunging the horseshoe into her water bucket with a hiss of steam. "Old man Henderson needs these shoes by noon, and his mare will not stand being shod in wet weather. I have to have them ready beforehand." The cowboy stepped closer, extending the umbrella over her head so the rain stopped pelting her face. "Then let me at least keep you dry while you work. Name is Zachary Xavier, but most folks call me Zach. I just rode in from Wyoming Territory looking for work, and I could not help but notice you are the only person in this whole town who seems to understand that work does not stop just because the weather turned bad." Dinah found herself smiling despite the cold seeping into her bones. "Dinah Calloway. And I appreciate the umbrella, Mr. Xavier, though I should warn you that standing this close to a forge means you will get covered in soot and sparks." "I have been covered in worse," Zach said, holding the umbrella steady as she pulled another piece of iron from her fire. "Wyoming dust gets into places you did not even know you had. At least soot washes off." They fell into an easy silence as Dinah worked, and she found herself hyper-aware of his presence beside her. He held that umbrella without complaint for nearly 2 hours while she finished all 4 horseshoes, never once suggesting she should pack up and come back when the weather cleared. Most men in Gold Hill either dismissed her work entirely or made comments about how blacksmithing was not women's work. But Zach just stood there like it was the most natural thing in the world for a woman to be hammering iron in the pouring rain. "You are good at that," he said when she finally set down her hammer and examined the finished shoes with a critical eye. "My father was a blacksmith back in Kansas before he died. I know quality work when I see it, and these are as fine as any he ever made." "Thank you," Dinah said, surprised by how much his approval meant to her. She carefully wrapped the horseshoes in oiled cloth to keep them from rusting. "Where are you staying in town?" "Nowhere yet," Zach admitted. "I just arrived about an hour ago. Thought I would see if any of the ranches around here were hiring hands before I spent money on a room I might not be able to afford tomorrow." Dinah made a decision that surprised her. "The boarding house where I rent a room has a stable that needs mucking out. Mrs. Patterson, who runs it, is getting too old to do it herself, and her son moved to Denver last year. If you are willing to do that and help with repairs around the place, she will likely give you a room and meals in exchange." Zach's face lit up with genuine gratitude. "That would be perfect." "Thank you, Miss Calloway. I promise I will earn my keep." "Just Dinah is fine," she said, then hesitated. "And if you meant what you said about your father being a blacksmith, I could use someone to help me sometimes. Heavy work that requires 2 sets of hands. I cannot pay much, but I can offer a percentage of what jobs we complete together." I would like that, Zach said, and the warmth in his voice made something flutter in Dinah's chest that had nothing to do with the cold rain. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, if you are not too tired from traveling. Meet me here at dawn. Zach nodded, then seemed to realize he was still holding the umbrella over her head. Let me walk you wherever you are headed next. This rain does not look like it will be letting up anytime soon. Dinah accepted, and they walked together through the muddy streets toward Old Man Henderson's place, Zach holding the umbrella carefully to keep her as dry as possible. She found herself telling him about how she had learned blacksmithing, how her father had taught her from the time she was 12 years old because he had no sons and refused to let his knowledge die with him. He sounds like he was a good man, Zach said. He was. He believed that a person's worth came from what they could create with their own two hands, not from whether they were born male or female. Not everyone in Gold Hill shares that view, but enough people need their horses shod that they tolerate me. More than tolerate, Zach said firmly. Those shoes you made were perfect. Anyone who cannot see that is a fool. They reached Henderson's house, a small cabin on the edge of town surrounded by a split-rail fence. The old man answered the door with a surprised look at seeing Dinah accompanied by a stranger, but his expression shifted to approval when she handed over the wrapped horseshoes. Fine work as always, Miss Calloway, Henderson said, pressing coins into her palm. And I appreciate you finishing them despite this weather. My mare thanks you too. As they walked back toward the boarding house, Dinah counted the coins. I should pay you something for helping me today. Holding that umbrella meant I could finish much faster than I would have otherwise. Keep your money, Zach said. Consider it an investment in our future partnership if you were serious about that offer. I was completely serious, Mrs. Patterson, a stout woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes, looked Zach up and down when Dinah brought him to the boarding house. You vouch for this man, Dinah. I do. He is a hard worker and he knows his way around a stable. He will be helping me at the forge too. Then I suppose we can work something out, Mrs. Patterson said, though her tone suggested she would be watching Zach carefully. I will show you to a room, young man. Dinner is at 6 sharp, and I do not tolerate drinking or gambling under my roof. Yes, madam, Zach said respectfully. I appreciate your hospitality. That night at dinner, Dinah found herself seated across from Zach at the long table where Mrs. Patterson's boarders ate their meals. There were 5 others staying at the house, a mix of prospectors, shopkeepers, and a school teacher named Miss Evans, who had come west from Philadelphia. The conversation flowed around them, but Dinah kept stealing glances at Zach, noticing the way he listened intently when others spoke and the genuine interest he showed in their stories. What brought you to Colorado? Miss Evans asked him. Wyoming Territory is not so far away. Most men do not leave unless they have a reason. Zach set down his fork, his expression growing serious. My brother and I had a ranch up there. Small operation, just enough cattle to make a modest living. He died last winter when his horse threw him during a blizzard. By the time I found him, it was too late. After that, being there felt wrong. Every part of that ranch reminded me of him. I sold it to a neighbor and decided to start fresh somewhere new. I am sorry for your loss, Dinah said softly, and she meant it. She knew too well what it felt like to lose someone who had been central to your whole world. Thank you, Zach said, meeting her eyes across the table. I think that is why I stopped when I saw you working in the rain today. You had this determination about you, this refusal to let circumstances stop you from doing what needed to be done. It reminded me that life keeps moving forward whether we are ready or not, and sometimes the best thing to do is just keep working. The next morning, Dinah arrived at her forge to find Zach already there, having started the fire and organized her tools. "Hope you do not mind," he said. "I woke up early and figured I might as well make myself useful." "Mind, you just saved me half an hour of work," Dinah said, impressed. "Did you eat breakfast?" "Mrs. Patterson made me eggs and biscuits. That woman can cook like nobody's business." They settled into work easily, and Dinah discovered that Zach had not exaggerated his knowledge of blacksmithing. He knew when to pump the bellows, how hot the iron needed to be for different types of work, and could strike an anvil in rhythm with her own hammer when they worked together on larger pieces. By midday, they had completed more work than she usually managed in a full day alone. "We make a good team," Zach said, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool February air. The forge threw off tremendous heat, turning their workspace into a bubble of warmth even as frost still clung to the shaded parts of the street. "We do," Dinah agreed, feeling that flutter in her chest again. She tried to ignore it, reminding herself that she barely knew this man, but there was something about working alongside him that felt right in a way she could not quite explain. Over the following weeks, Zach became a fixture in Gold Hill and in Dinah's daily life. They worked together at the forge most days, taking on bigger projects that she had previously turned down because they required more hands. Word spread that Dinah Calloway had taken on a partner, and soon they were getting orders from ranches 30 miles out for everything from horseshoes to custom ironwork for gates and fences. Zach proved to be more than just a skilled worker. He had a way of talking to customers that put them at ease, and he never once took credit for Dinah's work, or tried to position himself as the real blacksmith while she was just his assistant. If anything, he made a point of praising her skills to everyone who would listen, telling them that she was the finest blacksmith in Colorado, and he was lucky to learn from her. "You do not have to do that," Dinah told him one evening as they closed up the forge. March had arrived with slightly warmer weather, though snow still crowned the surrounding peaks. "Do what? Talk me up to everyone. You are just as skilled as I am, maybe more so in some ways. You could easily run your own forge." Zach stopped what he was doing and looked at her seriously. "Dinah, you built this business from nothing after your father died. You faced down every man in this town who said you could not do it, and you proved them all wrong. I am just glad to be part of it. Besides, I meant every word I said. You are the best blacksmith I have ever worked with, and that includes my father." Dinah felt her cheeks warm and not from the residual heat of the forge. "That means a lot to me." "Good," Zach said, then seemed to hesitate before continuing. "Dinah, I want you to know that working with you these past weeks has been the best thing that has happened to me since my brother died. You gave me a purpose again, a reason to wake up in the morning feeling like the day mattered. I do not want you to think I am just saying that because we work together. I mean it." "I feel the same way," Dinah admitted, her heart pounding. "When my father died, I threw myself into work because it was the only thing that made sense anymore. But working alone gets lonely, even if you are too busy to notice it most of the time. Having you here has reminded me that there can be joy in the work, not just duty." They stood there in the fading light, the forge cooling behind them, and Dinah thought Zach might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her hand, his fingers warm and rough with calluses that matched her own. "We should get back to the boarding house before Mrs. Patterson serves dinner without us," he said softly, but he did not let go of her hand immediately. "Yes, we should," Dinah agreed, but neither of them moved for a long moment. That night, Dinah lay in her narrow bed listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling around her, and she could not stop thinking about the way Zach had looked at her in the dying light. She had not expected to feel this way about anyone, had convinced herself that her life was complete with just her work. But Zach had awakened something in her that she had not known was sleeping, a longing for companionship that went beyond just having a business partner. The next few weeks brought an unexpected challenge when a man named Marcus Stone rode into Gold Hill with two companions. Stone was a blacksmith from Denver who had heard about the quality of work coming out of Dinah's forge, and he was not happy about the competition. "I have been supplying ranches in this territory for 5 years," Stone said, confronting Dinah in the middle of the street on a bright April morning. "Then you come along and start undercutting my prices, stealing my customers." "I am not stealing anyone," Dinah said calmly, though she could feel tension coiling in her shoulders. Stone was a big man, easily 6 feet tall with hands like ham hocks. "People choose where to take their business. If they prefer my work, that is their right." "Your work?" Stone sneered. "Everyone knows that Cowboy partner of yours is doing the real smithing while you just heat the forge and fetch tools. No woman could make the pieces I have seen coming out of this shop." Dinah felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sharp. "I have been blacksmithing since I was 12 years old. Every piece that leaves this forge has my hands on it, and I will not stand here and let you diminish that." "Prove it then," Stone said, crossing his arms. "You and me, right now. We each make a horseshoe and we let the town judge whose is better. When I win, you agree to stick to small work and leave the ranch contracts to me." "And when I win," Dinah asked, "then I will leave Gold Hill and not come back. Do we have a deal?" Dinah knew she should probably refuse, should not engage with this kind of challenge, but the look on Stone's face made her too angry to back down. "We have a deal." Word of the competition spread through Gold Hill like wildfire, and by the time Dinah and Stone stood at their respective anvils in the middle of the street, it seemed like every person in town had gathered to watch. Zach stood close by, his expression worried. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. "That man is just trying to intimidate you." "I know," Dinah said, rolling up her sleeves. "But if I back down now, everyone will think he was right about me. I have to prove I earned my place here." Someone provided raw iron and a portable forge for Stone, and the mayor, a portly man named Walter Green, acted as timekeeper. "You each have 30 minutes to create a horseshoe," he announced. "The town will vote on which is better quality." Dinah blocked out the crowd and focused on her work, letting her hands remember every lesson her father had taught her. She heated the iron to exactly the right temperature, gauging by color rather than measurement, and began to hammer it into shape. Each strike was precise, controlled, shaping the metal with a combination of force and finesse that came from years of practice. Beside her, she could hear Stone working too, his hammer falling in a rapid rhythm that suggested he was trying to finish quickly rather than carefully. She refused to let that rush her. Better to take the full time and create something perfect than to hurry and make mistakes. When Mayor Green called time, both horseshoes were plunged into water and then laid out on a table for inspection. The crowd pressed close, murmuring among themselves as they examined the work. Dinah's horseshoe was smooth and even, with nail holes precisely placed and edges that would not chafe a horse's hoof. Stone's was serviceable but rough, with small imperfections visible even to an untrained eye. "All in favor of Mr. Stone's work," Mayor Green called, and a few hands went up, mostly Stone's companions and some men who Dinah knew did not approve of women blacksmiths on principle. "All in favor of Miss Calloway's work." The majority of hands rose, including Old Man Henderson and several ranchers who had been her customers for years. Stone's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. "This was fixed. You all decided before we even started." "The work speaks for itself," Mayor Green said firmly. You made a bet, Mr. Stone, and you lost. I suggest you honor your word and leave town peacefully." For a moment, Dinah thought Stone might start a fight, but then he noticed how many people were watching, how many witnesses there were to his promise. He grabbed his tools and stomped toward his horse, his companions following. "You got lucky today," he called back to Dinah, "but luck runs out eventually." "That was not luck," Zach said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That was skill and dedication and years of hard work. Miss Calloway is the best blacksmith in this territory, and you know it." The crowd murmured in agreement, and several people came forward to congratulate Dinah. She accepted their praise graciously, but inside she felt shaky, the adrenaline of the confrontation finally catching up with her. When the crowd finally dispersed, Zach walked with her back to the forge. "You were amazing," he said. "I have never seen anyone work iron like that. You made it look effortless." "It was not effortless," Dinah admitted. "I was terrified the whole time. What if I had lost? What if he was right and I was only getting business because people felt sorry for me?" "Dinah, look at me," Zach said, stopping and turning her to face him. "That man was wrong. You are not getting business because of sympathy or because I am helping you. You are getting business because you are genuinely talented. I have worked with my father, who was considered one of the best blacksmiths in Kansas, and you are every bit as good as he was. Better, even in some ways. You need to believe that." Dinah looked up at him, at the sincerity in his green eyes, and something inside her cracked open. "How did you become so important to me so quickly?" she whispered. "The same way you became important to me," Zach said, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "Sometimes people just fit together right, and fighting it seems foolish." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Dinah rose on her toes to meet him halfway. Their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Dinah felt like she was forging something new, something precious that had nothing to do with iron and everything to do with the way her heart felt too big for her chest. When they finally broke apart, Zach rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks." "So have I," Dinah admitted, then laughed. "Though I imagined it happening somewhere more romantic than the middle of a muddy street." "We can have romance later," Zach said with a grin. "Right now, I think we should celebrate your victory. Let me take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant. They have real tablecloths and everything." Dinah agreed, and that evening she put on her best dress, a deep blue cotton that she usually only wore to church. When she came down the stairs at the boarding house, Zach was waiting for her, cleaned up and wearing a white shirt she had never seen him in before. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Dinah teased, though her heart was racing. Dinner was wonderful. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their childhoods and their dreams for the future. Zach told her about growing up in Kansas, about how his parents had died in a cholera outbreak when he was 16, leaving him and his older brother to fend for themselves. They had worked as ranch hands for years before saving enough to buy their own small spread in Wyoming. "Losing my brother felt like losing everything," Zach said. "He was the only family I had left, the only person who remembered our parents and our childhood. When he died, I felt like I was supposed to have died too, like I should have been able to save him somehow." "You cannot blame yourself for that," Dinah said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Sometimes terrible things happen, and there is nothing anyone could have done to stop them." "I know that in my head," Zach said, "but my heart took longer to catch up. Being here with you has helped. You make me feel like I am allowed to build a new life, like I am not betraying my brother's memory by being happy again." "I am sure your brother would want you to be happy," Dinah said softly. The people who love us never want us to stop living just because they are gone. They walked back to the boarding house slowly, taking the long way through the quiet streets of Gold Hill. The night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "I want to court you properly," Zach said when they reached the boarding house steps. "I want to take you to socials and buy you flowers and do all the things a man should do when he is falling for a woman. Is that all right with you?" "More than all right," Dinah said, her smile so wide it almost hurt. "I would like that very much." Over the next few months, Zach kept his word. They continued to work together at the forge during the day, but evenings and Sundays were for courting. He took her on picnics up into the mountains where wildflowers bloomed in impossible profusion. They went to the social dances held at the church, where Zach proved to be a surprisingly good dancer. He bought her books from the traveling salesman who came through town, remembering an offhand comment she had made about loving poetry. The whole town watched their romance bloom with interest and approval. Even Mrs. Patterson, usually stern and suspicious of young men, seemed to think Zach was a good match for Dinah. "He is steady," the older woman told Dinah one afternoon while they were shelling peas on the boarding house porch. "And he respects you, which is more important than most young women realize. I have seen too many marriages where the man expects his wife to give up everything she is just to serve his needs. That boy looks at you like you hung the moon." "I look at him the same way," Dinah admitted. "Is it too soon? We have only known each other for a few months. My husband proposed to me 3 weeks after we met," Mrs. Patterson said with a rare smile. "We were married 42 years before he passed. When you know, the amount of time does not matter as much as the quality of it." In early July, Zach took Dinah up to a meadow high in the mountains where aspen trees rustled in the breeze and a stream rang cold and clear over smooth stones. They had packed a picnic lunch, but Zach seemed too nervous to eat much. "Is something wrong?" Dinah asked, concerned. "No, nothing is wrong," Zach said, then took a deep breath. "Actually, something is very right, and I am terrified of messing this up." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, Dinah saw a simple gold band with a small diamond set in it. "This was my mother's ring," Zach said, his voice shaking slightly. "The only thing I have left from her. Dinah, I know we have not known each other for very long by most people's standards, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You make me want to be better, to work harder, to build something lasting. Will you marry me?" Dinah felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Zach slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy. And Dinah thought about how strange life was, how you could wake up one morning planning to forge horseshoes in the rain and end up finding the person you were meant to spend your life with. They set the wedding for late August, giving them time to prepare and for Zach to send word to some distant cousins in Kansas who were his only living relatives. Dinah had no family left, but the whole town of Gold Hill seemed to adopt their wedding as a community project. The church ladies insisted on making her dress. The hotel donated their dining room for the reception, and old man Henderson offered to give her away since her father was gone. The night before the wedding, Dinah sat up late with Mrs. Patterson, who helped her pack her belongings. Zach had bought a small house on the edge of town with money he had saved from selling his ranch in Wyoming, combined with what he had earned working at the forge. It needed work, but it had good bones and enough land for a large garden and some chickens. "Are you nervous?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "A little," Dinah admitted. "Not about marrying Zach. I have never been more sure of anything, but about everything changing. My whole life has been about work, about proving I could run the forge and support myself. Now I will be part of a partnership in every way, not just at work. What if I am not good at being a wife? Being a good wife is not that different from being a good person, Mrs. Patterson said. You show up, you do your part, you choose kindness even when it is hard. You already know how to do all of that. The rest will come naturally. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, with the kind of perfect blue sky that only seemed to exist in Colorado. Dinah wore the white dress the church ladies had made, with its high collar and fitted bodice and skirt that fell in soft folds to the floor. Her dark hair was pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. When she walked down the aisle of the small church with Old Man Henderson's arm linked through hers, she saw Zach waiting at the altar and forgot to be nervous. He was wearing a new black suit, his hair neatly combed, and the expression on his face when he saw her was so full of love that Dinah felt her eyes well with tears. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to support each other through whatever life brought, to work side by side in the forge and in life, to build something together that would last. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Zach kissed her with a sweetness that made the whole congregation sigh. The reception was a boisterous affair with music and dancing and more food than Dinah had seen in one place since her father's funeral. People kept coming up to congratulate them, to wish them well, to tell stories about watching their romance unfold over the past months. I knew it the day he held that umbrella over you in the rain, Old Man Henderson said, his eyes twinkling. A man does not stand for 2 hours in the cold just to keep a woman dry unless he is already half in love with her. As the sun began to set, Zach and Dinah slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand to their new home. Zach carried her over the threshold, and they both laughed at the tradition of it, but Dinah felt her heart swell with happiness as she looked around the space that was now theirs. It needs furniture, Zach said apologetically. We have a bed and a table and not much else yet. We will fill it together, Dinah said, turning to wrap her arms around his waist. We will make it ours. That night, they made love for the first time, learning each other's bodies with a mixture of tenderness and passion. Dinah had been nervous, having only vague ideas about what to expect, but Zach was patient and gentle, and the experience was more wonderful than she had imagined. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the darkness, talking softly about their plans for the future. I want to expand the forge, Dinah said, her head resting on Zach's chest. Hire an apprentice maybe, take on bigger projects. We could become the premier blacksmith shop in this whole territory. We could, Zach agreed, running his fingers through her hair. And I want to build us a real workshop, something larger than what we have now with better equipment. Maybe start taking custom orders from as far away as Denver. What about children? Dinah asked quietly. Do you want them? Eventually, yes, Zach said, but there is no rush. I want time with just you first, time to build our business and our life together. Then, when we are ready, we can start a family. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Dinah felt a contentment she had not known was possible. She had thought her life was complete when it was just her and her work, but now she understood that there had been a hollowness inside her that she had been too busy to notice. Zach had filled that space, had made her whole in a way she had not known she was missing. The first year of marriage brought challenges and joys in equal measure. They expanded the forge as planned, hiring a 16-year-old boy named Tommy to help with basic tasks and learn the trade. Business continued to grow, and by the winter of 1882, they had more work than they could handle. But the work was hard, and there were days when exhaustion made them short with each other, when the stress of running a business tested their patience. They had their first real fight in November, when Dinah insisted on filling a large order despite being sick with a bad cold, and Zach tried to make her rest. "I am not some fragile thing that breaks at the first sign of difficulty," Dinah said, her voice hoarse and her temper frayed. "We need this money, and I will not let one ranch down just because I have a cough." "You have more than a cough," Zach argued. "You have been running a fever for 2 days and you can barely stand up straight. The money is not worth you making yourself worse." "You do not get to decide what I can and cannot do," Dinah snapped, then immediately felt terrible when she saw the hurt flash across Zach's face. "I am not trying to control you," Zach said quietly. "I am trying to take care of you because I love you and I am worried about you. But if you cannot see the difference, then maybe I should just keep my mouth shut." He left the house, and Dinah stood there feeling awful and stubborn in equal measure. She forced herself to go to the forge despite feeling like death, but after 2 hours she had to admit defeat. Her hands were shaking too much to work safely, and her head was pounding so hard she could barely see straight. When she stumbled back to the house, she found Zach sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He looked up when she came in, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. "You look terrible," he said, standing up and crossing to her. "Come on, let's get you to bed." "I am sorry," Dinah said, tears streaming down her face, though she was not sure if they were from feeling sick or from guilt. "You were right, and I was too stubborn to admit it. We both said things we should not have," Zach said, helping her to the bedroom. "I should not have made it sound like I was trying to control you. I know how important your independence is to you." "My independence is not more important than our marriage," Dinah said, as Zach helped her into bed and pulled the quilts up around her. "I need to remember that asking for help or taking advice is not the same as being weak. And I need to remember that you have been taking care of yourself for years and do not need me to make your decisions for you," Zach said. He pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. "But I am going to insist you rest until this fever breaks. Can you accept that?" "Yes," Dinah whispered, already feeling sleep pulling at her. She was sick for almost a week, and Zach took care of her through all of it, bringing her soup and tea, sponging her face with cool water when the fever spiked, sitting beside the bed reading aloud to distract her from feeling miserable. By the time she finally recovered, Dinah understood more clearly than ever how lucky she was to have found him. "I love you," she told him when she was finally well enough to sit up and eat a real meal. "I do not say that enough. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," Zach said, kissing her forehead gently. "And you do say it enough. I see it every day in the way you smile at me over breakfast, in the way you hand me tools at the forge like we are reading each other's minds, in the way you reach for me in your sleep. Love is not just words." As 1883 began, they started talking more seriously about starting a family. They were financially stable now, with money saved and the business running smoothly. The house was fully furnished and felt like a real home, and more than anything, they both felt ready to add to their family. When Dinah missed her monthly courses in February, they both felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The doctor confirmed what they suspected. She was expecting a baby, due in late October or early November. "We are going to be parents," Zach said wonderingly, his hand resting on Dinah's still flat stomach. "I cannot believe it." "I am terrified," Dinah admitted. "What if I am terrible at it? What if I cannot figure out how to balance the forge and being a mother?" "Then we will figure it out together," Zach said, "just like we figure out everything else." The pregnancy was not easy. Dinah was sick for the first 3 months, unable to work at the forge because the heat and the smell of hot metal made her nauseous. She hated being sidelined, hated feeling weak and useless, but Zach and their apprentice Tommy managed to keep the business running. By the time she started feeling better in her 4th month, she was determined to get back to work, despite Zach's concerns about whether it was safe. "Women have been working through pregnancy since the beginning of time," Dinah said. "I will be careful and I will stop if anything feels wrong, but I am not going to spend the next 6 months sitting around being useless." They compromised. Dinah worked at the forge but avoided the heaviest tasks and took frequent breaks. Zach watched her like a hawk, ready to intervene if she pushed herself too hard, but he tried not to be overbearing about it. As her belly grew, Dinah found herself falling more in love with Zach every day as she watched him prepare for fatherhood. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving intricate designs into the wood. He read every book about babies he could get his hands on. He talked to their unborn child every night, his hand resting on Dinah's stomach, telling stories about his day and promising to be the best father he could be. "You are going to be an amazing father," Dinah told him one night as they lay in bed, her back aching and the baby kicking hard enough to keep her awake. "I hope so," Zach said. "I keep thinking about my own father, trying to remember everything he did right so I can do the same. He was patient and kind, and he taught us that hard work was important but family was more important. I want our children to know that too." "They will," Dinah said, "because they will have you as an example." In early November, Dinah went into labor on a cold morning when frost painted patterns on the windows. The labor lasted through the whole day and into the night, and there were moments when Dinah thought she could not do it, could not get through another contraction. But Zach stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her face, telling her how strong she was and how proud he was of her. Finally, as dawn was breaking on November 7th, their son was born. He came into the world screaming, healthy and red-faced and absolutely perfect. The midwife placed him in Dinah's arms, and she looked down at his tiny face and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "We have a son," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Zach leaned over them both, his own eyes wet. "He is beautiful. You are beautiful. You did so well." They named him Daniel after Dinah's father. Daniel Zachary Xavier, a name that honored both their families. Watching Zach hold his son for the first time, seeing the wonder and love on his face, Dinah felt like her life had come full circle. She had lost her father, had felt alone in the world, but now she had created a new family, had given her father's name to a new generation. The first months of parenthood were exhausting. Daniel was a fussy baby who did not sleep well, and Dinah spent most of her nights walking the floor with him, trying to soothe his cries. The forge work fell mostly to Zach and Tommy during those early months, though Dinah tried to help when she could, fitting in a few hours here and there while the baby slept. "I feel like I am failing at everything," Dinah said one night in March when Daniel was 4 months old. She had been trying to finish a set of hinges while Daniel napped, but he had woken up crying before she could complete the work. And now she sat at the kitchen table with the baby in her arms, exhausted and discouraged. "I am not producing enough at the forge. I am so tired I can barely think straight, and I do not feel like I am being a good mother because I keep wanting to go back to work." "You are not failing at anything," Zach said firmly, taking Daniel from her arms and bouncing him gently. "You are doing the hardest job in the world, raising a tiny human while also trying to maintain a business. The fact that you are doing both at all is amazing. And for the record, you are a wonderful mother. Daniel is healthy and loved and well cared for. What more could he possibly need?" "I just feel like I should be better at this," Dinah said, wiping tears from her eyes. "My mother died when I was so young. I do not have memories of what she did or how she managed everything. I am making it all up as I go along." "So is every other parent in the world," Zach said. Nobody really knows what they are doing. We are all just trying our best and hoping we do not mess our kids up too badly." Dinah laughed despite herself. "That is not very reassuring." "But it is true," Zach said with a grin. "Look, how about this? Tomorrow Mrs. Patterson said she would be happy to watch Daniel for a few hours. Why do you not come to the forge with me, just the two of us like old times? Get your hands back on the work, remember why you love it. I think you need that." The next day, Dinah returned to the forge properly for the first time since Daniel's birth. At first, her hands felt clumsy and out of practice, but gradually the muscle memory returned. She heated iron and hammered it into shape, feeling the satisfaction of creating something useful and beautiful. By the end of the afternoon, she felt more like herself than she had in months. "Thank you," she told Zach as they closed up the forge. "I needed this. I love Daniel more than anything, but I needed to remember that I am still me, still a blacksmith, still the woman who forges horseshoes in the rain." "You will always be that woman," Zach said, pulling her into his arms. "Being a mother is part of who you are now, but it is not all of who you are. We will figure out how to balance it all. We always do." They settled into a new rhythm over the following months. Dinah worked at the forge several hours a day while Mrs. Patterson or other women in town watched Daniel. As he grew older and less fussy, it became easier to manage. By his first birthday, he was a happy, curious toddler who loved watching his parents work, and they set up a safe corner of the forge where he could play while they smithed. In the spring of 1885, Dinah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more prepared, more confident in her ability to handle both motherhood and her work. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and when their daughter was born in December, the labor was shorter and less traumatic. They named her Margaret Rose Xavier, called Maggie from the start. She had Zach's green eyes and Dinah's dark hair, and she was a much calmer baby than Daniel had been. She would lie contentedly in her cradle at the forge, watching the play of light on the heated metal and seemingly untroubled by the noise and heat that had made Daniel fussy. "She is going to be a blacksmith like her mother," Zach predicted, watching how Maggie's eyes tracked their movements around the forge. "Look at her. She is fascinated by it all. Or she just likes the bright colors," Dinah said with a laugh. "She is only 2 months old. Let's not assign her a career just yet." Life settled into a comfortable pattern over the next few years. The forge continued to thrive, becoming known throughout Colorado and even into neighboring territories for quality work. They hired 2 more apprentices as the business grew, and eventually moved to a larger workshop that Zach designed and helped build. Daniel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and asking questions. Maggie was more adventurous, always getting into things and testing boundaries. They were different as night and day, but they adored each other, and watching them play together filled Dinah's heart with joy. In 1888, when Daniel was 4 and Maggie was 3, the family took a trip to Denver. It was the first real vacation they had taken, and Dinah was nervous about leaving the forge in the hands of their apprentices for a whole week. "The world will not end if we take a few days off," Zach assured her. "Tommy and the others know what they are doing. And the kids need to see something beyond Gold Hill. There is a whole world out there." Denver was overwhelming in its size and noise, but also exciting. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants where other people did the cooking, and visited shops that sold goods from all over the world. The children were wide-eyed with wonder, and even Dinah had to admit it was thrilling to see new places and experience new things. On their last night in the city, after the children were asleep in the hotel room, Zach and Dinah stood on the small balcony looking out at the lights of Denver spread below them. "Thank you for this," Dinah said, leaning against Zach's shoulder. "I did not realize how much I needed a break until we took one." "We should do this more often," Zach said. "Maybe not Denver every time, but trips, adventures. I want our kids to grow up knowing that life is more than just work, as important as work is." "You are right," Dinah said. "Though I am also looking forward to getting home and back to the forge." "Is that strange?" "Not at all," Zach said with a laugh. "I have been missing it too. We built something good in Gold Hill, you and me, something worth being proud of." When they returned home, Dinah was surprised to find that she had received a letter from a blacksmith's guild in Denver, inviting her to join their organization. Women were not typically accepted into such guilds, but word of her skill had spread, and they wanted to offer her membership based on the quality of her work. "This is a huge honor," Zach said, reading over her shoulder. "You should accept." "It means traveling to Denver twice a year for meetings," Dinah said uncertainly, "and paying membership dues that we could use for other things." "Dinah, you worked your whole life to be recognized as a legitimate blacksmith, to have your skills valued on the same level as any man. This is that recognition. Of course you should accept." She did, and it opened new doors. Through the guild, she made contacts with other blacksmiths and learned new techniques. She started getting commissioned for artistic metalwork, in addition to the practical pieces that had been her bread and butter, creating decorative gates and railings for wealthy clients in Denver and Colorado Springs. By 1890, the Xavier family was prosperous and happy. The forge employed 6 people and produced some of the finest metalwork in the territory. Daniel, now 6, had started school and showed promise as a scholar. Maggie, 5, was already begging to be taught blacksmithing, though Dinah insisted she wait until she was older. In the summer of that year, Dinah discovered she was pregnant again. The news was unexpected but welcome, though Dinah worried about managing 3 children along with the business. "We will make it work," Zach assured her, as he always did. "We have more help now than we did with the first 2. And honestly, I love the chaos of a full house. I came from a big family before the cholera took my parents, and I miss that energy." Their 3rd child, a son they named Thomas after Zach's brother, was born in February 1891. He was a happy, easygoing baby who seemed content no matter what chaos swirled around him. Daniel and Maggie were thrilled to have a baby brother, though Maggie complained that she had been hoping for a sister. "Maybe next time," Zach said with a wink at Dinah, who gave him a look that suggested there might not be a next time. But there was. In 1893, their 4th and final child was born, another daughter they named Catherine. By then, Dinah was 35 and Zach was 39, and they both agreed that their family was complete. 4 children, Dinah said wonderingly, looking around their dinner table one evening at the chaos of her children eating and talking and arguing over nothing. "When I was working alone at that forge, sick with grief over losing my father, I never imagined this. Never imagined having a partner who saw me as an equal or children or a life this full." "I never imagined it either," Zach said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "After my brother died, I thought the best I could hope for was to survive, to just get through each day without the pain eating me alive. I never thought I would be this happy again." As the years passed, the children grew and the business continued to prosper. Daniel became interested in engineering and talked about going to university someday. Maggie made good on her childhood desire to learn blacksmithing and became Dinah's shadow at the forge, showing a natural talent that reminded Dinah of herself at that age. Thomas was artistic, always drawing and painting, seeing the world in colors and shapes. And Catherine, the baby, was a wild child who climbed trees and caught frogs and showed no interest in sitting still for anything. In 1898, when Dinah was 40 and Zach was 44, they celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary with a party that half of Gold Hill attended. Standing in the yard of their home, surrounded by friends and neighbors and their 4 healthy, happy children, Dinah reflected on how much had changed since that rainy day in 1881. "What are you thinking about?" Zach asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "That day you held an umbrella over me while I forged horseshoes," Dinah said. "How you told me later that you were asking me to forge a life together, not just horseshoes." "I remember," Zach said softly. "I was terrified you would say no." "I was terrified I would say yes," Dinah admitted. "I had convinced myself that I did not need anyone, that I was better off alone. But you showed me that partnership does not mean losing yourself. It means becoming more of who you are meant to be." "You did the same for me," Zach said. "You gave me a reason to live again when I thought I had lost everything worth living for. You gave me purpose and love and this beautiful family. I would do it all over again in a heartbeat, every moment from that first day in the rain until now." They kissed, long and sweet, and their children made exaggerated gagging sounds that made them laugh. "Come on," Maggie called. "Dad is about to make his speech, and we all know it is going to be embarrassing." Zach did make a speech, thanking everyone for coming and for being part of their lives over the years. He talked about building a life with Dinah, about the joy of watching their children grow, about the satisfaction of creating something lasting and meaningful. His voice cracked with emotion several times, and Dinah had to wipe tears from her own eyes as she listened. "To my wife," Zach said, raising his glass, "who is the strongest person I know, the finest blacksmith I have ever worked with and the love of my life. Thank you for saying yes to that terrified cowboy who held an umbrella in the rain." "To Dinah," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. Later that night, after the guests had gone home and the children were finally asleep, Dinah and Zach sat on their porch watching the stars. The night was cool and clear and the mountains rose dark against the sky. "Do you ever regret it?" Dinah asked. "Giving up your ranch in Wyoming, starting over here?" "Never," Zach said without hesitation. "That ranch was my brother's dream more than mine. I was just along for the ride. This, though, what we built together, this was our dream, yours and mine, and it is better than anything I could have imagined building alone." "I feel the same way," Dinah said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Though I should probably confess something. That day in the rain when you held the umbrella, I thought you were incredibly handsome but also possibly insane for standing in the cold just to keep me dry." Zach laughed. "I was a little insane. Love makes you do crazy things. You loved me even then, that first day." "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you," Zach admitted. "You were this fierce, determined woman hammering iron in the rain like you were daring the world to try and stop you. How could I not fall in love with that?" They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of Gold Hill, the distant barking of dogs and the soft rustle of wind through the pine trees. "I want you to know something," Dinah said eventually. "No matter what happens, no matter what challenges come or how old we get, I will always be grateful for that rainy morning. For you seeing me when so many people looked right through me. For you asking me to forge a life instead of just horseshoes. You changed everything for me, Zach. You made me believe I could have everything, the work I loved and a family and a partnership that made me stronger instead of smaller. That is a gift I can never repay." "You do not have to repay it," Zach said, tilting her face up to kiss her gently. "You gave me the same gift. We saved each other, Dinah. That is what love does. It saves us from the loneliness we did not even know we were drowning in." The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. In 1902, Mrs. Patterson passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 81, and the whole town mourned the loss of a woman who had been a pillar of the community. She left the boarding house to Dinah and Zach in her will, a gift that surprised them both. She always said you two were her favorite success story, the lawyer explained. She told me once that watching you build your life together gave her hope that love still existed in the world. They turned the boarding house into additional housing for their apprentices, creating a place where young people learning the blacksmithing trade could live affordably while they learned their craft. It felt like a fitting tribute to Mrs. Patterson, who had always believed in giving people chances. Daniel went off to the Colorado School of Mines in 1904 to study engineering, fulfilling the dreams he had harbored since childhood. Maggie took over more and more of the forge work, becoming a master blacksmith in her own right and starting to attract her own customers who specifically requested her work. Thomas got a scholarship to study art in Denver, his paintings already gaining attention from galleries. And Catherine, true to form, announced at age 15 that she wanted to be a doctor, shocking everyone but Dinah, who had always known her youngest daughter would do something extraordinary. In 1910, Maggie married a local rancher named James Foster, a good man who respected her work and had no problem with his wife being a blacksmith. The wedding was beautiful, and Dinah cried as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle, remembering her own wedding day so many years ago. "Our baby is getting married," Dinah whispered to Zach, who was also suspiciously misty-eyed. "She is not a baby anymore," Zach said. "She is a strong, independent woman just like her mother. We did good, Dinah." "We did," Dinah agreed. The grandchildren started arriving in 1911. First Maggie's son William, then Daniel's twins Emma and Edward in 1912. Thomas married a fellow artist in 1913 and had a daughter named Grace. Even Catherine, busy with medical school, eventually married in 1915 and had a son named Henry in 1916. By 1920, Dinah and Zach were in their 60s, grandparents many times over and still working at the forge most days, though at a slower pace than their youth. They had passed the day-to-day running of the business to Maggie and their most senior apprentices, but they still came in to work on special projects or to teach the younger generation. "We are getting old," Dinah said one afternoon, stretching her aching back after spending several hours at the anvil. "Speak for yourself," Zach said, though he was massaging his own shoulder. "I am as spry as ever. You can barely get out of bed in the morning without groaning," Dinah teased. "Those are groans of wisdom," Zach said with a grin. "Each one represents a lesson learned through years of experience." They still made each other laugh every day, still held hands when they walked through town, still kissed goodnight before falling asleep. The passion of youth had mellowed into something deeper and more comfortable, but no less real. They were two people who had truly become one, who could finish each other's sentences and communicate with just a look. In the summer of 1925, Gold Hill threw a celebration for Dinah and Zach's 42nd wedding anniversary, and to honor their contributions to the town over the decades. A new town hall had been built, and its gates featured ornamental ironwork created by Dinah and Maggie working together, a beautiful design of intertwined horseshoes and mountain flowers. "You two are Gold Hill's greatest love story," the mayor said in his speech. Dinah and Zach sat in chairs of honor, surrounded by their 4 children, their spouses, and 11 grandchildren ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers. "You showed us that true partnership means lifting each other up, that love is built in the everyday moments of choosing each other again and again." That night, lying in bed in the house they had shared for over 40 years, Dinah traced the lines of Zach's face with her fingers. He was 69 now, his hair completely silver and his face deeply lined, but to her he was still the handsome cowboy who had held an umbrella over her in the rain. "I would do it all again," she said softly. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, I would choose you every single time." "I would choose you too," Zach said, his voice rough with emotion. "You made my life worth living, Dinah. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had done thousands of times before, secure in the knowledge that they had built something rare and precious. They had forged not just horseshoes and gates and hinges, but a life full of love and purpose and meaning, a legacy that would outlast them both. The years continued to pass gently. Zach's health began to decline in his 70s, his heart growing weaker. By 1930, he was mostly confined to home, though his mind remained sharp. Dinah stayed by his side, and their children visited constantly, bringing grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren for him to meet. "I am not afraid," Zach told Dinah one evening as they sat together watching the sunset through their bedroom window. He was 74 now, frail but still himself. "I have lived a good life, a full life. I got to love you for almost 50 years. How many people can say they were that lucky?" "Do not talk like that," Dinah said, though tears were streaming down her face. "I am not ready to lose you." "You will never lose me," Zach said, taking her hand. "I will be in every horseshoe you forge, in every sunset over the mountains, in the laughter of our grandchildren. I will be wherever you are always. That is what love does. It makes us immortal." Zachary Xavier died peacefully in his sleep in October 1930, with Dinah holding his hand. He was 74 years old, and he had lived to see his family thrive and his business endure. The funeral drew people from all over Colorado, testament to the impact he had made not just on Gold Hill but on everyone who had known him. Dinah grieved deeply, but she did not break. She was 72 years old, and she had been strong her whole life. She continued to work at the forge when she felt up to it, teaching her grandchildren the same way her father had taught her, and she had taught Maggie. She told stories about Zach constantly, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who had not known him as long. "Your grandfather was the best man I ever knew," she told them. "He taught me that strength and gentleness can exist in the same person, that true love is not about grand gestures but about showing up every day and choosing each other even when it is hard. He held an umbrella over me in the rain and asked me to forge a life, and I said yes, and it was the best decision I ever made." Dinah lived another 5 years without Zach, years filled with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with quiet mornings at the forge and evenings surrounded by family. She never remarried. How could she when she had already found her perfect match in the spring of 1935? At the age of 77, Dinah fell ill with pneumonia. Her children gathered around her bed, and she looked at each of them with love and pride. "I am ready," she told them. "I have lived a wonderful life, and I am ready to see your father again. Take care of each other and remember that love is the only thing that really matters. Everything else is just details." Dinah Calloway Xavier died on April 15, 1935, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She was buried next to Zach in the Gold Hill Cemetery, their headstones carved with horseshoes intertwined with flowers, a testament to the life they had forged together. The blacksmith shop continued to operate under Maggie's supervision and eventually passed to her children. The Xavier name became synonymous with quality metalwork throughout Colorado, a legacy that lasted well into the 21st century. But more than the business, Dinah and Zach's real legacy was the love they had shown each other and the family they had built, a love story that started with a cowboy holding an umbrella in the rain and ended with a lifetime of partnership, passion, and unwavering devotion. Years later, one of their great-great-grandchildren, researching family history, found Dinah's journal from 1881. In it was an entry from that rainy February day when she had met Zach for the first time. "A cowboy held an umbrella over me today while I forged horseshoes," the entry read. "He stayed for 2 hours without complaint, and when we parted, I found myself hoping I would see him again. There was something about him, a steadiness and kindness that drew me in. I do not know if anything will come of it, but for the first time since Father died, I felt like maybe I could have more than just work. Maybe I could have a life." Below that, in different ink and clearly written years later, was another line in Dinah's handwriting. "He asked me to forge a life and I said yes. It was the beginning of everything." And it was. Their love story became legend in Gold Hill, passed down through generations as proof that true love exists, that two people can find each other even in the hardest circumstances and build something beautiful together. The forge still stands, converted now into a museum dedicated to their memory, and tourists come from all over to hear the story of the woman who forged horseshoes in the rain, and the cowboy who held an umbrella and asked her to forge a life. Their story reminds everyone who hears it that love is not just about the big moments, the proposals and the weddings and the anniversaries. Love is in the small things, the daily choice to stand beside someone even when it is inconvenient, the willingness to hold an umbrella in the rain just to keep them dry. Love is built one moment at a time, forged like iron under patient hands, shaped into something strong and lasting and beautiful. Dinah and Zach understood that. They lived it every day of their 45 years together. And in doing so, they created not just a successful business or a large family, but a legacy of love that would inspire everyone who came after them to believe that it is possible to find someone who sees you for who you truly are, who values your strength instead of being threatened by it, who stands beside you in the rain and helps you forge not just horseshoes, but a whole life.